Okay, dear colleagues, let's start our meeting, our webinar. I'm glad to see all of you here online and offline. We continue a series of our seminars devoted to the opportunities for Ukrainian researchers in the framework program Horizon Europe. We started conducting these events last year when we were appointed as a national contact point by the Ministry of Science and Education. Also, we are having support from the Horizon Europe office in Ukraine. Right now, this year, we also have plans to conduct a series of seminars, 6 seminars. Some of them will be devoted to European Research Council activities. Some of them will be devoted to another direction of our NCP for legal and financial issues. Also, we plan to conduct training sessions, and we will announce that ahead. So let's start our seminar. It's devoted to the Pillar 1 of the Horizon Europe, Excellence Science, and in the particular to the European Research Council. Its history, its funding opportunities, types of projects, and testimonials of successful projects. So first of all, let me welcome our guests, our speakers. And I will start from our ladies. I'm not sure whether they already connected or not, but they will make their presentations. So first of all, let me welcome Dr. E.Oras. She's Associate Professor in Analytical Chemistry in University of Tartu. Also, she's an archaeochemist working on analysis combining analytical chemistry and ancient material culture. Also, our second speaker is Dr. A.O'Mєйлі. She's Associate Professor in International History in Institute of History of Leiden University, Netherlands. And also, Dr. A.O'Mєйлі is an expert in the United Nations issues, the Global South, and the history of international relations. And now we proceed to our first speaker, Dr. Максим Цыпленок. He is a scientific officer involved in the evaluation procedures of proposals in the ERC Life Sciences panel, number 4. It's Physiology in Health, Disease and Aging, and also in other life sciences panels. Also, he is involved in project follow-up after the granting phase. I would like to express my gratitude for our speakers, and I would like to invite all our participants to listen carefully to this information, which you receive from first hand, so to say, and please ask your questions. We hope that you already have an idea of your future ERC project, so just ask questions which you're interested in. Here you can see the program of our event. We will start from general organizational issues of ERC participation. Then I will proceed to 2 success stories of winning starting grants. Starting grant is a type of ERC project which call for the starting grant will be announced maybe at the end of this year or probably next year. So just today you will get necessary information and you will have a lot of time ahead to prepare your proposals. And then also will be information on in Ukrainian language by me on work program for year 2025. To what to pay attention to, what calls will be open this year, and some probably issues what to pay special attention to. So after each presentation, we will have 5, 6, 7 minutes of questions and answer sessions. In order not to gather all our questions by the end of our seminar, also our guests, our speakers, they won't be able to stay with us till the end of our webinar, as far as they have a very tense agenda. That's why, please, if you have questions to our speakers, please ask them immediately after their presentation. So now we start our seminar, our program, and I pass the floor to Maxim Tsitlenok with presentation, Funding Opportunities with European Research Council. Please.
All right. Can you hear me and see my presentation?
Yes, we hear you and see your photo.
And you see the presentations, the slides, right?
Yes.
All right. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Maxim Tsitlenok. I'm working for the European Research Council Executive Agency as scientific officer for the last more than 5 years in the life science domain. And as been already said, I'm involved in the evaluation procedures, but also in the project follow-up of the ERC projects. So today I would like to give you an overview of the ERC type of ERC grants, the evaluation criteria and the process, and I will mention briefly about the ERC supporting actions offered by the ERC for different countries. So as mentioned before, there are 3 pillars in the EU funding, Pillar 1, Pillar 2, and Pillar 3. And ERC is part of the Pillar 1, Excellent Science. ERC has and had a budget of over 36.5 billion euros over 20 years. And the current budget for 2025 of ERC is approximately 2.2 billion euros. But overall, in Horizon Europe, ERC has a budget of 16 billion euros, and this is approximately 17% of the overall budget, which is a lot of money actually for research and innovation. And according to the Draghi's report for the European Commission, the budget for overall framework program for the next framework program from 2027 has been suggested to be doubled. And we don't know what is the budget going to be, but we hope that the ERC budget is going to be bigger in the years to come. And as you can see here on the slide, for 2026 and 27, we already expect the increase, or it's already distributed in the budget as in the years before. So what is ERC? Just let me move here. Yeah, so ERC is governed by the ERC Scientific Council. These are the scientists who are the driver's seat of the ERC. These are 22 prominent researchers. They've been appointed by the European Commission. These are the scientists from different fields. The Scientific Council establishes the overall scientific strategy of the ERC. It controls the quality of operations and management, but it also ensures communication with the scientific community. The Scientific Council also appoints the panel members, and these are the panel members who sit in our evaluation facilities and are involved in the evaluation of the proposals. The panel members have full independence in the evaluation and the ranking of the proposals, and these panel members also appoint the remote referees for the proposals which made it to step 2 in the interviews. So it's all done by the scientists in the field, so not by us scientific officers who work in the agency. The whole work is done in our building, in the ERC Executive Agency. It executes the annual work program as established by the Scientific Council. It implements calls for proposals and provides information and support to applicants. The whole peer review process is organized here in our building. And we manage and so establish and manage grant agreements, and we provide administrative, scientific, and financial support and follow-up for our projects. We also carry out communication activities, and we ensure that the information is disseminated to the scientific community, to the Commission, and to all ERC stakeholders. So what does it mean to have an ERC grant? So ERC is a quite prestigious grant. It allows you to work on a research topic of your own choice. It can be in one of the scientific domains. You can see here life sciences, physical sciences and engineering, or social sciences and humanities. It allows you to gain financial autonomy for 5 years. It can be a bit shorter, but usually we expect the projects to be for 5 years. Once you receive the grant, it really allows you to negotiate with the host institute to receive very good conditions for your work and for your team. It can also help you to attract excellent team members to help you working on your project of your interest. And it can also help you to establish collaborators from anywhere in the world. What is also very interesting about the ERC grant is that you can move to any place in Europe if you desire with this grant, or associated country, and it's really flexible. Also, having received the ERC grant, it can also help you to receive additional funding from national funding agencies or other type of support. As you can see here, the average success rate to receive an ERC grant is 12%. This is around the same success rate as for many other EU type of grants. However, the difference of the success rate between different countries varies a lot. As you can see here, that in Netherlands, Germany, or Switzerland, you have much higher success rate than in the Eastern European countries. On this graph, very right, you can see that Ukraine's success rate is 1%, or maybe even below 1%. As far as I can remember, there is currently only one grant in Ukraine, consolidated grant, and there were overall a bit less than 100 applications so far in Horizon Europe. So what type of ERC grants are there? First of all, there is a starting grant, and the starting grants are foreseen for junior researchers who have completed their PhD 2 to 7 years. So they are eligible to apply if they completed their PhD not earlier than 2 years. So they should have between 2 and 7 years of after PhD experience. This allows you to receive up to 1.5 million euros for 5 years. Then the consolidated grants are more for more experienced researchers, senior postdocs, or the principal investigators who have between 7 and 12 years of after PhD experience. They can receive up to 2 million euros for 5 years. Then it's a bit more complicated to receive an advanced grant, because this is more for senior researchers who have quite significant research achievements in the last 10 years or more, have a very good track record, and these researchers are able to receive up to 2.5 million euros for 5 years. So this eligibility between 2 and 7 and 7 and 12 years old, 12 years after PhD might change in the future. There will be a bit more flexibility, but this will be decided in next year for the next or the after next work program. There's another type of
Максим,
grant.
do you hear?
Yes, there's an echo. Yeah, I can hear you.
Your slides don't move.
Which slides do you see now?
First one.
All right. You don't. Okay. So you don't see the slides. It's still the first one. Okay, but I will restart them. Sorry. I will restart the presentation then. I will share now the presentation. You tell me if you see. So, do you see the slides? I can't hear you. The microphone is muted. Sorry. No, but it's muted. Yeah.
We see the first slide.
Okay, and now it's moving.
No. Я вже це виключив.
Okay. I will try.
Ну, там чудно.
Well, I will try them that maybe like this. Is it moving?
Yes.
All right. Okay, good. But I shared in a different way. Maybe that's. Anyway, so as you can see here, so just go quickly about the Pillar 1. European Research Council is in Pillar 1 with the budget allocated to ERC of 16 billion euros for the Horizon Europe work program. And for the FP10, we expect the higher budget. You can see here 2.2 million for this year, and the budget is going to be increased. This is the Scientific Council members, and I already spoke about their role in the managing of the ERC agency, or the program, the work programs. This is our agency, and the work we're doing I already mentioned. This is a quick overview about the ERC grants and what type of benefits you have if you receive an ERC grant and what it allows you to do. And here's the slide about the average success rate of ERC projects by host institution and the countries. And as you can see here, that there is a huge difference between certain countries and the success rate of receiving an ERC grant. Unfortunately, the success rate for Eastern European countries is below what we have, and we would like to increase the success rate by working with the national contact points and with researchers to improve the quality of the applications and to have a high chance of succeeding in receiving an ERC grant. So this is an overview of the ERC grant schemes: starting grants, consolidated grants, and advanced grants. I spoke about the eligibility and the number of years after the obtaining the PhDs and the amount of money you can receive for that. And there is another type of grant, it's a synergy grant, and this is a collaborative grant between several principal investigators who can receive up to 10 million euros for 6 years, and one principal investigator can come outside of the EU or associated country, so it can be US, for example. And these are very competitive grants, and in this year, year scope, we had a lot of applications, and these are a bit more for more experienced researchers, but sometimes we see junior researchers working with more senior researchers on the ERC projects. Then there is a proof of concept grant, and this is for already people who have an ERC grant, and they might decide to bring the project closer to the market, and they have an idea, and they can receive up to 150,000 euros to implement that idea. Good. So all of the individual grants I mentioned before can receive up to 1 million additional money, and these funds allow you to, this is like a startup cost for example, for moving to Europe or even moving between countries if a certain host institution doesn't have equipment, so you can gain access to large equipment or purchase major equipment. Or if your research project requires major experimental and field work, and that might be very expensive, and this money can be requested in your proposal. However, it doesn't cover the personal costs. So, do you see the next slide? The slides are moving okay? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. So, once you decide to apply for an ERC grant, you may need to choose what type of grant you would like to apply to. You also need to make sure that you're eligible. I was speaking about the number of years after your PhD, and the date of the PhD is really the date of your defense. It's not the date when you receive the certificate. Sorry, let's move here. So it's the date of your PhD defense. So there are also certain ERC resubmission restrictions. If you applied before you received the C, for example, in the first step, you're not allowed to apply for 2 years. And you also have to have a minimum of 50 years of working time on the ERC project in the EU member state or associated country. Certain grants have certain commitment time. For example, for starting grants, you have to have at least 50% commitment to the ERC grant, or for advanced grants should be a minimum of 30%. Then, however, you can have extension of eligibility for the starting and consolidator grants, and this extension might allow you to apply even after 7 years after your PhD, and the conditions are listed here on the slide. For example, for each maternity leave, you before or after your PhD, you get an extension of 18 months. For paternity leave, the actual time taken off, it should be the document should be provided by the host institute where you worked or your employer to show how many days you took off for paternity leave. If you had a long-term illness or the long-term illness of your family member, it should be certified by the medical doctor. Disability. Military service, which is quite relevant for Ukraine, clinical training, or natural disaster. It can be natural disaster, but also human-caused disaster. And I think war falls also under this criteria. And it can allow you to get extra time after your PhD to apply for starting grants and consolidated grants. So, what are the main evaluation criteria of the ERC grant or ERC proposal? And the main evaluation criteria is the excellence. As you might know, in ERC, it's the research project evaluated and the principal investigator or the applicant. And now the main focus is on the research project. And your research project should have a groundbreaking nature. It should be very ambitious. and it should be also feasible in implementation. Before in ERC, we had a mention of high risk, high gain. The Scientific Council removed this term because the project might be risky, but might not be very risky, but it still might be a groundbreaking project, and it still falls under the excellence criteria of the ERC. For the principal investigator, there is no numerical scoring. The panel evaluates the intellectual capacity, creativity, and the commitment of the applicant to execute the project. As I just mentioned also a few seconds before, the main focus is on the proposal, not on the principal investigator. We very often see in the panel meetings that the panel is really discussing the proposal. And if they have doubts, they look, okay, and then or if they have to compare different proposals between each other to see which one might make it on the to the step 2, and they are very similar in the nature of the proposals in terms of excellence and groundbreaking nature. They might look at the principal investigator and see, okay, he is a bit stronger than this principal investigator. However, the main criteria for principal investigator is to have he or she should be really able to execute the project, should have necessary experience, motivation, and education to do the project. So how is evaluation organized, the evaluation process? It's one submission, so you submit only one time, but it's a two-step evaluation. In step 1, the panel members who are appointed by the Scientific Council have access to the Part B1 of the proposal. Part B1 is the synopsis of the proposal and the CV. And the evaluation is done remotely. Then we organize a panel meeting where the panel members come to Brussels to our office and discuss the proposals. They rank the proposals and they give them a score. The score is B or C. That means the proposals are rejected. If the proposal receives a score B, this applicant is not able to apply next year. The applicant has to wait 2 years. If the applicant receives the C, the applicant has to wait 3 years for the reapplication. It's not about the project, it's about the applicant. So it can be the same project or it can be different project, but the resubmission restrictions are applied to the applicant. So the proposals which received an A, they make it to step 2. The maximum of proposals which can make it to step 2 is 44, but it's not for all panels the case because it depends on the number of submissions and the number of quality applications. And there is a new feature now that in the panels where you might have more than 44 A's for bigger panels, the proposals are ranked, and the proposals which received an A but not good enough to make it to step 2, they are still able to reapply next year, and we call them A non-invited. So then the proposals which made it to step 2 are assessed by the panel members. It can be the same panel members, might be slight changes to reallocation of the workload, and also the panel members assigned remote referees, expert reviewers in that field of the proposal to assess these applications. After several weeks or 2 months, panel members receive the reviews from the remote referees and from other panel members, and we have a step 2 panel meeting. However, for this step 2, the panel members and the remote referees have access to Part B1 and Part B2 of the proposal. And Part B2 is a lengthier version of the proposal with more details about the methodology. In the step 2, we have an interview with the applicants, and then the proposals are ranked A or B. B means that they would not get any funding. A means if we have enough funding, all A's would get the money. However, we have often the case that, for example, 10 proposals A get funding and another 5 A's do not get funding, so they get on the reserve list. And sometimes one or another proposal get funding later. All of the A's and B's here who made it to step 2 can reapply next year. So when you prepare your proposal, it's very important to get the information early enough. You have to go to the European Commission website, funding and tender portal. You have to download the templates. You really have to do a lot of reading to prepare yourself. You should talk to your institution's grant office or national contact point. Get in touch with the ERC grantees. If you have questions, you can send us an email. And if you establish collaborations, you really have to have an agreement by email, for example, from a collaborator that this person is going to work with you on the project if you receive funding. So this is the website, EU Funding and Tenders portal. You can search for calls there and get the information. And if you like to know about what type of projects have already been funded, for example, from your field or from your country, you can go to the ERC dashboard. We have really a lot of information there, which can help you in preparing your proposal to get an idea what type of projects are funded and what is expected from the applicants. I already mentioned before that you can apply with any host institute in any EU member state or associated country. And you can change it before you start your project. So you can apply with one host institute, but get the money and move to another host institute before you start your project. But you can also move your project during or your funding, remaining funding, and your team to another country during your project or during the implementation time. You can negotiate with your host institute your position, the access to equipment, maybe additional funding, or access to infrastructure, and so on. And it's very important that the host institution is not an evaluation criteria. And the quality of the host institute is does not increase the chances or your score of getting funding. And it's we will really pay attention during the panel meeting and when the panel members discuss it, and we remind them, and they are also instructed before the meeting that the host institution or the quality of the host institution is not an evaluation criteria. So it doesn't matter whether you apply with the Max Planck Institute in Germany or with the university in Kiev, for example. I think it's very important. So when you decide to apply, sometimes the applicants try to think strategically when to apply. So in order to accumulate certain number of years of experience or to improve their track record, to have a higher chance to apply. This is a bit scattered here, but the overall message is that it's really the chances of success are flat over number of years after a PhD, and we advise the applicants to try to apply earlier because they might receive feedback from they will receive feedback from the panel members, and that will help them to improve their proposal. But however, they might not be eligible anymore for the starting grants because they will be in the consolidator grants window, and then the competition is different. So, and the criteria are also different to be successful. So we really advise the applicants to apply earlier. And even if you receive a C and you need to wait longer, if it still falls under your eligibility window, it improves you can improve your application. And we know that the success rate of the resubmitted applicants is 50% higher than the first time submission. And we on this graph you can see that there in each call we have for starting grants, most of the applicants have around 6 years after the PhD, and in COG 11 years after the PhD. But here it doesn't show actually how many of those are resubmitted, the ones who submitted here and maybe then submitted here again 2 years later. So when you decide to apply for an ERC grant, you need to choose your panel. There are 28 panels covering all disciplines, and the best way to choose your panel is to see where your project fits the best. There are no strategies or whatsoever in terms of, oh, this panel, I might have a higher chance in this panel than this panel because of the number of applications. We know, for example, in LS7 we have a lot of applications. There is more money in LS7. However, the chances of success are the same in every panel because the budget is distributed according to the number of applications. So you really need to choose the panel which fits best for your proposal. It's also the descriptors for each panel. There are more descriptors on the website. They don't represent any ERC priorities or European Commission priorities. It's really basic research. If you have a project in certain areas, really look into the keywords and where it would fit best. If you have an interdisciplinary proposal which covers several disciplines, and it might be some of them cover, it might be an intersection between life sciences and physical sciences. You try to see where it would fit best, whether it's life sciences or physical sciences, but you're also allowed to put a secondary panel on your proposal, and this helps us, the scientific officer, together with the panel chair and panel members, to assign the proposal to the right experts. And we ask the expertise from another panel which would help us in the panel meeting. So when you start writing your proposal, there are several types of documents you have to complete. The part A, all the administrative forms, the annexes about you need the support from the host institute, a copy of your PhD certificate, documents for extension of eligibility, and then there are two parts, part B1 and part B2. The panel members have, in the step 1, have access only to part B1 and the administrative form, and in step 2 they have access to part B1 and part B2. But the panel members, they don't have access to this. So this is done, the checking of eligibility is done at the level of the agency and people who are working in the agency. The part B1 is very important, and they should be already excellently written. It entails the abstract, the proposal of 5 pages, and your CV and track record of 4 pages. And the part B2 should include more the methodology, and it's a longer version of your proposal. There is also a funding ID for 1 page. You need to put in already what type of funding you already receive. And this is not evaluated, but we as an agency need to know to make sure that the applicants do not get the same funding twice or for the same project twice. It should be a different project. So CV and track record. This is a very important point because here you see the evaluation criteria in the work program. I'm not going to repeat it, but you can see it on the PDFs or the forms provided. But what is important for your CV? You need to show the scientific leadership. If you can show that you can publish without your PhD supervisor, that's a very strong point. If you can show that the idea of your proposal differs from the work of your supervisor, it's already great. If you can, you need to show that you can work independently and manage a project for 5 years, because it's a lot of money and it requires a lot of management as well. So you can put on your previous not only publications but also other criteria such as managing some already projects or teaching at your institute or developing a teaching program or organizing a conference. All of these things count for the assessment of the principal investigator. And another point is it's good to show that you are internationally active in terms of conferences maybe, or serving on the committees or journal editor. All of these things you can put in the application. And the more important part is, of course, the research project. These are here their evaluation criteria. You see here the two criteria regarding the methodology and the resources. These two criteria, the two below, so you have the first three, which are assessed in part one or in step one, and the last two are assessed together with the first three in the step two. And now for the research project, there is no explicit reference to high risk, high gain. Instead, the project should be groundbreaking, ambitious, but feasible. And the ERC will always encourage risky research projects. And there is no explicit reference now to novel methodologies. It's still okay to use the older methodologies, but if the idea is novel or groundbreaking, it's still okay. So if you made it to step two, you're invited for an interview. The applicants receive instructions what is expected from them in step two. It can be a presentation or just question and answer session. Usually it's 5 to 7 minute presentation with 15 to 20 minutes question and answers. You really have to prepare for this. It has to be a clear presentation. It shouldn't be a business presentation because you're talking to the scientists. They're really passionate about science and research. You don't need to explain your CV. You need to anticipate questions and practice. And you really need to know the methods of your proposal, because the panel will recognize if the proposal has been written by head of department or a postdoc, and the PI who is proposing to do the work doesn't know how it is done. And if you have new data, you should also present it, because it might help you in to receive the grant. So I will, because we're running out of time, but I will quickly mention about what are the main reasons for the rejection. Sometimes the scope of the project is too narrow, it's too focused, or too broad. If the implementation is not feasible, if the project is a collaborative project, so it's not the PI who is leading the project or the applicant, but it's really the work of several people together. So it's an individual grant, then a collaborative grant. Or there's certain missing details in the work implementation, or if the principal investigator doesn't have a sufficient track record to execute the proposed project. Or if the applicant is not prepared for the interview, doesn't address the questions really well, doesn't have the supporting evidence for the project. Preliminary data is not a criteria, but if there is no preliminary data, it's harder to justify the feasibility of your proposal. Okay, and here quickly the work program for 2025. The advanced grants will be open in May. There is no calls yet open for 2026 as far as I know, so we need to wait for it. And it's if you decide to find out more about the application process, how to write your proposal, how to prepare your proposal, on YouTube we have videos which are ERC classes, and they're very informative and very useful. We will update them because there are slight modifications for the current work program, but overall they're very, very useful. And I just wanted to quickly mention about the ERC supportive actions for applicants. I don't know if we discuss it later or not, but just quickly that there are two types of supporting actions. These are visiting fellowship and the mentoring initiative. And the mentoring initiative is quite relevant for Ukraine because from 2024, you can see here, Ukraine is part of the mentoring initiative. You can see here Ukraine together with other countries. And what is it? Why do we do this? This is to provide the applicants with feedback on their proposal, and especially for the applicants who don't have experience with applying for ERC grants. When it is done, it's usually before the submission of your proposal, so it helps you to improve the quality of the proposal. And this is done through the specific national and regional support offices. Here, this is the process, how it works. But what we know is that before, we have 94 members who were 65 grantees and 29 former panel members. They supported 119 ERC applicants in the application, and more than 50 applied and 6 have been funded. So the success rate was already 12%. So it's a very good, I think it's very useful initiative. So you, and usually these are the applicants who, or the countries which do not have high success rates. So it's very useful. And in 2024, more than 1,000 ERC grantees and former panel members expressed interest to participate in as a mentor. So thank you very much. Yeah, I am open for questions, and I will stop the presentation. Sorry, it's muted. I think you don't need the microphone. Just unmute the Zoom.
У нас проблеми з мікрофоном, тому трошки буде зараз таке ехо. Якщо є запитання у когось, будь ласка.
You can ask in Ukrainian. Тоже, вы можете на украинском, я могу, ну, мне просто будет проще ответить на английском, наверное, но все равно я все прекрасно понимаю.
Добре. А так?
Ні, так у вас
Все одно.
Там два микрофона, один на компьютере, один на микрофоне. Надо или один, или другой выключить. Нет, так не слышно теперь. Лучше компьютер включить, а этот микрофон отключить.
Тоді виключайте ці мікрофони. Добре?
Так не буде цей глот чути.
Не буде чутно?
Ні.
Ну, давайте, Марія, задайте питання, тому що у нас наступна учасниця.
Це вибудь.
Wait, please. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not researcher, I'm scientific officer, being in чує.
Да, я знаю.
Я чую.
Мгм. Добре. I'm scientific officer, being NCP for research infrastructure in the previous work program. So I have the general questions more than precise. First of them, it is about quality and quantity of submissions from Ukraine. We can see at the dashboard, we can see the overall quantity of submitted proposals. And we have now only one, as you said, successful project. But for right work NCP, for organizing the right work and efficient work of NCP, can NCP or any other, I don't know, any responsible person can get more detailed information about those projects submitted. At least it's not about the theme and more, it is not about the ideas. It is only about name of person who submitted and his her affiliation.
Regarding the submission, I don't think we have, it's allowed to be shared due to the data protection. However, if it's been funded, of course, you can have access to it because it's on the ERC dashboard and you see the person who has received the grant, the abstract, the deliverables, the publications, everything. But about the applicants, I think due to the data protection, it's not published who has submitted and from where. We know, I checked yesterday, I don't remember the time frame, there were maybe overall 85 submissions. We know this, but who? I mean, I can find it out, but it's not for us to share this information with. I think what, yeah, this
At least with NCP, it would allow to work with those people and assist them and help them to resubmit, to find their mistakes, weak points. No, you see, so
it should be in the interest of the applicants to
know the
contact the NCP. So I don't know. Yeah, we don't know what type of quality of applications or what from which fields these are. So I honestly don't. I'm not able to help you. And I think the approach should be they should be interested in coming to you, asking for advice and improving the application.
I see. The rules are the rules. And the other question is once more a general question. We know that the pillar 1 is consists of 3 sections. One's about each one about idea. It is about ERC grant, about access to large facilities. It is infrastructures and Marie Skłodowska-Curie. The question is, it is unexpected maybe question, how these sections complement one another, and would it be possible, for example, to join to ongoing ERC project in by called Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions? Because Marie Skłodowska-Curie, it is 2 or 3 year project, and ERC grant is more long project.
So the Marie Curie Skłodowska action is usually for junior researchers who have just received their PhD as a postdoc. And while you're doing it, of course, you can apply for an ERC grant. And by the time I think you receive an ERC grant, it will be already done. So, and then you can start your ERC project. If you have both the Marie Curie and ERC grant, which is a rare case, I guess, but I think it's still possible. It's just you can get the money, for example, to fund you as a researcher from Marie Curie Skłodowska, and already start your ERC project by finding other people from your team on the project. I think that would be possible, but it should be, it shouldn't be the same project running at the same time. So it can't be, it should be a different project. So ERC should be a different project from your Marie Curie project. It can be a continuation, it can be something really novel, but it shouldn't, there shouldn't be two funding sources for the same thing.
I see. Thank you. That was my question. I'm satisfied. Thank you. You explained well.
Я сюди йду.
Indeed.
Окей.
Сідаємо. Just a moment.
Yeah, a lack of place. So, Maxim, thank you very much for your answers, and I hope that now the whole picture of participating in ERC is getting more clear for our participants. Thank you very much. And now I pass the floor to our second speaker, Dr. E.Oras, who is principal investigator in successful ERC project type starting grant, Food Identities, Biomolecular Archaeology Reveals Multiple and Dynamic Social Identities. Please, Esther.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. And I will try to
Perfect.
share the slides as well. Now I just have to figure out which screen I want to share. That's going to be the one. And on the slide mode as well. Slideshow. Can you see the slides?
Yes, yes,
Perfect.
first.
Great. Yes, the first slide is on. Excellent. Thank you. But first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I kind of do the follow-up from the previous presentation and what Maxim, if I'm not mistaken with the name, was saying, like, just keep on trying. Because actually the thing that my example is the fact that I applied 4 times. So I was successful on the 4th time. So just never give up. Maybe that's the most important thing. And although it might seem huge and kind of like blue sky thing, I think everyone who can think about, maybe I should apply for ERC is fully capable of getting one as well. It just takes perhaps a bit of time. But yes, thank you, Karina. Thank you all for inviting me over to talk a little bit, as I was asked, about my project and give you some potential kind of inside tips and tricks that might be useful for your application process. So I am indeed the PI of a newly funded, actually the grant is about to start this September, so I postpone it a bit. And it's a starting grant, ERC starting grant, that is based on SH6 panel. So it's humanities and social sciences. But the project actually is very interdisciplinary. It's based on archaeology, but its applications and kind of methods are fully in natural sciences using biomolecular archaeology methods. I'm based at the University of Tartu, just that you know, here in Estonia. It's nice and sunny out there. The spring is coming. So, actually, I have 2 positions, both in archaeology and analytical chemistry. So that's the background about me. So I'm going to show you actually the slides that I had for my interview, just to give you a brief overview of what the project was about. So Food Identities, or acronym Food ID, is all about getting to understand identity building through ancient dietary practices, and dietary practices being reconstructed from advanced cutting-edge biomolecular methods that are actually mostly employed in modern medical sciences and environmental sciences. But our case now, we're kind of throwing those on ancient skeletal material, as you see here. And the whole idea is to build those kind of living human beings from those fancy biomolecular methods and tell the stories of individual biographies in the past. So I'm working mostly on 10th, 14th century AD archaeological inhumations from the Eastern Baltic for my project. And the whole idea really is that we tend to take food and diet and the kind of food ways as something really homogeneous and mundane. You kind of eat whatever you get, and there is no variation in the diet. Although in our own research, previous research, but also from other scholars, we have been able to see already that there are certain sex-based dietary differences, like male and female having different foods. But indeed that we see the same thing even in pottery, because oftentimes with this inhumation cemeteries, we have pots conceived together with the deceased, and there is certain match between the sex and age of the person who has been buried and the foodstuffs that actually buried together with him or her in the graveyard. The main problem, though, is that we are really challenging when it comes to kind of resolution of understanding. So we can talk about major large food groups, like someone eating fish or someone eating some kind of ruminant carcass fats, but we don't really get to the bottom of it in terms of what kind of fish and what kind of dairy products, for instance, were they consuming, which actually hinders the understanding of what kind of food sources were available to different people and kind of social groups. Further on, we haven't really started to appreciate the social contextualization of those findings. We tend to go, yes, sex and age-based differences, but actually there are a lot more, and this is exactly that the Food ID project is going to tackle. So first of all, building on this kind of really kind of thick description of individual profiling, meaning that, yes, age and sex, but also we can talk about some religion-related identifications, diseases, provenance, household communities, and so on and so forth. So we have those multiple identity categories deriving from the archaeological material. And then we have these amazing materials that we can analyze in terms of skeletal remains and pottery. And from those, we are able to carry out multiple biomolecular analyses, combining different biomolecules such as lipids, proteins, DNA, but also carbohydrates. And analyzing those from the skeletal remains as well as pottery, we can start building actually fine resolution dietary biographies, lifetime dietary changes, but also really subtle differences. For instance, was it eating sturgeon or herring? You know, that would be one of the amazing examples. And it can make a big difference what kind of species you had in your diet. And further on, we will apply more advanced statistics and machine learning-based modeling techniques to really drag out the multiple and dynamic identity building throughout those communities throughout the 400 years, as well as tackle kind of touch upon individual dietary portraits, so kind of living, sensing, feeling, and tasting individual behind this quite lovely skeleton, but still not too fleshy, let's put it like this. So the whole idea of the project is to reveal the multi-dimensional and dynamic identity reconstructions through using next generation biomolecular dietary analysis, and this is like the really cutting edge biomolecular methods that we're going to apply. And the whole like overall idea is really to bridge biomolecular and social archaeology, so natural sciences and humanities, bringing them together in a kind of synergetic way. So that's what my project is all about. And now I want to tell you a little bit how it actually came to be. So my background is fully in archaeology, but during my PhD studies that I did in Cambridge, UK, I started developing my skills in archaeochemistry. And when I returned back to Estonia in 2015, I got the postdoc, or I applied for the postdoc now in analytical chemistry already, and started building research capacities here at the University of Tartu, which have now resulted in the group called Alchemy. So this is actually indeed a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research team, which I'm heading at the moment. We are literally based in different buildings in chemistry and natural sciences field, and also in archaeology. And all those members, we are currently on 16 members, are either from, well, not either, let's put it like this. They are from either natural sciences or humanities, most of them from archaeology, but or like people who have developed their skills in various biomolecular techniques. And I would say like that kind of team was really the basis why I also applied for the ERC and why I feel like I have sufficient backup and background to do that. And just to give you an example, what we do in our Alchemy group, we indeed bring together archaeology and chemistry quite a bit of environmental sciences and geology, and also ancient DNA research, and that actually ties into modern DNA research. So microbiota analysis and population genomics is actually heavily involved in what we do and to whom we communicate. So this group is really kind of wide-ranging, and hence I was able to propose multiple of those methods in the Food ID project as well, that we indeed have expertise and we have background and previous experience, either collaborating with those different fields or actually doing the analysis ourselves. Yes, I think I'm kind of rushing perhaps too much, but then again, it will keep you on track afterwards on time. But in terms of my experience, really, what I would tell is, as I said before, ERC, you can do this. It's actually, I mean, obviously, it is really, you know, people think it's a blue sky science and it's very difficult to get. Well, the success rate, I always give this example, success rate actually for ERC starting grants at least, last time when I applied in my panel, it was 13%, so 1-3, whereas our own national grants, it was a little bit below 13%. So it's actually, in my case, it was easier kind of to get the grant from the ERC in comparison with national funding opportunities. This is no rocket science, I would say. In fact, the formats of the proposal are quite straightforward. So, and especially when you have support from your local institute or the European-wide framework or network that was mentioned here before, that can be easily done. And maybe in terms of my kind of experience, tips and tricks, and there's going to be a small list here. If you're not, if you haven't done the ERC proposal yet, what I would recommend to start from really is that I think in every country, but maybe even centrally in the European Commission, sometimes when you Google it, there is a selection of funded applications available. And I would really highly recommend to start from just skimming through those or reading, if possible, from your own field and the panel to which you're planning to apply, going through those proposals just to see what they look like. And that would be like the really first step and first thing to do, which I didn't list here. But what I did list is that practice makes perfect. As I mentioned before, it was the 4th time for me. My first round was just after 2 years of my PhD, but that was the first possible slot that I could apply for the ERC. It was in 2017. Meanwhile, I got 2 kids, thankfully, or due to that, I had an extension also. So the time frame to apply for ERC starting grant is from 2 to 7 years of your PhD graduation. It is more than 7 years for me, but 2 kids gave me extra 3 years there. So the first one was kind of similar to the things that I was presenting here, but I have to admit, like in 2017, I wasn't ready yet myself, but it's like, it was way too early in terms of my experience and expertise. And I completely now understand the very critical reviews that I got from my first proposal. The second proposal that I did 2 years after that turned out to be a bit too regional for the reviewer's mind. I got B for that, which meant that not for the interview. So the first one got to the interview, the second one didn't get to the interview. And I turned it into a national grant that was very successfully running over the last 5 years. The third one got really good feedback, but didn't make it to the interview. And that was the one that I developed into the 4th one, which actually was successful in the end. If at all possible, I would advise you to get expert help, and expert help in terms of grant writing expertise, because here I list University of Tartu Grant Office because that's applicable to me. I was using their services for my 4th grant. That was extremely useful, also being a PI of a larger group, but I found it like most useful for me is like someone actually poking me every now and then and saying like, start writing this or start working on that. And that was extremely helpful because otherwise I would have gone mad. And so time management can be tricky sometimes. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind is grant writing is a genre. It's genre like, I don't know, poet or novels. It's the same thing. There are certain tricks and tweaks that just make it happen, so to say, so that the reviewers actually understand what you're saying. And this is why this kind of second opinion or like expert grant writer can be really useful. I'm not necessarily, I know there's lots of companies across Europe who are actually asking you to pay a lot of money for that kind of service. I'm not necessarily suggesting that. I would rather say like if your NCPs are kind of locally, you have people or you have people who have been successful in your field or some other fields who are willing to help you with this, I would recommend to use this help as much as possible because, you know, just again, like outsider view helps to write a much clearer and much more compact proposal in the end. Then the big thing is that this ERC-able topic. So there are certain topics that are kind of standing out right away. And here you can think of it like the major questions or topics that are important to all of us or kind of linked with all of us. I don't know, we can take some, perhaps food is one of those as well as an example, but I mean cancer research, for instance. From history, let's take Vikings, like everybody knows about Vikings. You can, you know, so or kind of pollution, that would be another thing. So it has to be something catchy and of a wider significance so that you can think of like, oh, I would be interested in that, you know, like, or you know, someone outside or from your family or from your relatives, whenever you would talk about it, say, oh, I can link to this. This is important. This is what we need to really study, you know. And it's not easy to find, actually. And sometimes it's kind of fine-tuning and tweaking every now and then, like to find this ERC-able topic. And it actually takes time. And it takes time also in terms of talking about this to other people, kind of discussing this, thinking in what kind of source to put it into. And that's why I say it's finding a good topic is a long process and it needs constant fine tuning. So please make sure to take time for this. In my case, even though I had already my topic, because my previous proposal was quite highly rated, my third one, it still took me almost 2 months to get like the food idea, the thing that I wrote down in the end in my proposal. So just, you know, try to also enjoy this process. It's like in being in labor, more or less. It's like, and when it's out, it's like, oh my God, that's it. That's what I want to do. And you get goosebumps and you're just writing this like lunatic. I also highly recommend kind of international scale, and maybe that was one of my problems with my first unsuccessful proposal, was that international scale also like in terms of like anyone across the world would understand why you need to do that in your field, for instance. And also the international scale in the sense that people in your field outside your country or kind of your immediate research group, they have wider perspective about what is relevant, what kind of makes sense and doesn't, where the logic starts to go wrong, so to say. And this is why like the international like involvement of international consultants, maybe even, but preferably maybe someone who would serve later on as an advisory board member in your project. This would be a good way to go. And I, in my proposal, I had 5 different people from international background, like my collaborators from previous years, from some of the leading biomolecular archaeology labs, reading my proposal, giving some feedback about this. And that was really, really helpful because it, like otherwise, it might have ended up again too regional or too focused. Then the kind of the usual suspects, so to say, as with everything, the visuals are actually important, and the well-structured proposal is important in the sense of making it just more appealing for the reader. If you have been evaluating any proposals and grants yourself, you can say right away, whenever there is some kind of image or picture, it's like, oh, thank God. or you can see like loads of big chunks of text, like it's like impossible, it's difficult to drag yourself through this. And it starts to actually, the clarity kind of starts to diminish from there. And that's why I say like bullet points, highlighting. I mean, obviously not too much, it's not artwork, it's scientific work in the end. But I wouldn't underestimate this. And my husband had this great joke. It's like, when you're asking that much of money, you better ask it very nicely. So I kind of agree with him. It's like, yes, let's put some time and effort into kind of making it nice as well. And also maybe something that you have discussed, I'm sorry, I wasn't here for a very long time before, is that it used to be like ERC was the high risk, high gain projects. Actually, they have turned it recently more into, okay, it has to be ambitious, but there has to be ambition and feasibility balance. So not necessarily like risky, no, not really a good thing. Too risky isn't too good. They actually want to see that you can do this. And that's why maybe pilot studies sometimes are worth considering if possible. But I mean, it's not a must, so it's not always the case. But yes, keeping in mind this kind of balance between the ambition and feasibility. And what I would really, really recommend is just to create a support group, and in a very good sense, from your research group, from people around you, maybe some other people who are writing for the same round, so that every now and then you can kind of ventilate, talk to people and say, how are you doing? What are you writing into impact? Or what about this ethics thing? That's really, really helpful. And in my own case, because I have this, the whole research group behind me as well, I really, every now and then, when I was really kind of drowning into like everything that I had to do, I asked their input for a little bit of, background reading or kind of briefing about the latest advancements and specific techniques and so on and so forth. So that can be really useful, because it can be a lonely and tiresome work to write the proposal. And that's why you need this kind of, a family around you. So that would be my last suggestion here. Excellent. I'm actually quite well on time. I want to say thank you so much. Here are the contacts. If there's some archaeologists and biomolecular specialists in the audience, we're more than happy to hear about you, or if you want to get in contact, and my email here as well. Thank you so much. And needless to say, Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, very much for your presentation. And maybe there are some questions from our audience, please. Yes. Then I briefly have some questions. I know that you are short of time, so
yeah, I have to run to the lecture, but I still have 5 minutes.
you mentioned that you tried 4 times, but was it the same project rewriting, or it was some different 4 ideas of projects?
Yeah, it depends who looks at it. So because my panel is also historians and archaeologists, I presume for historians it was all the same. For them it's like biomolecular techniques. But for archaeologists, I think there were 3 different projects. So the angle was different. And I suppose the key for me really was to show not only like the fancy cutting edge methods that were like clearly there throughout all of those 3 projects or 4 projects, but like really bring in strongly like the historical questions, archaeological questions about the culture, about those people. And I think that was the key, but also keep in mind that my panel, it wasn't natural scientists. These were actually historians and archaeologists. So I presume they wanted to read something like this. And there weren't that many biomolecular archaeologists in the panel, but the reviews that I got 8 or 9 reviews. In the end, you could see that they have actually sent it out to really leading specialists in the field, because they were really picking on very kind of minor details about the kind of analytical work in the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe another question, just what is the reasonable term of starting preparing for proposal? A year, a half of year, a month? What
Yes, again, I think it depends on the person. For me, I would say like, if you don't have any previous experience, start a year in advance. if you have done it already and you know like how it all looks like, then half a year, for me it was half a year, but really heavy writing for 2 months, I would say. But I also have a friend and good colleague who had the idea, wrote it up in 2 weeks and got the grant in the first round. So everything is possible, right?
Okay, okay, thank you very much, Esther.
Thank you.
Go.
And once again, indeed, if needed, you have my contacts here and my name somewhere in the program as well. Feel free to get in touch if you want to.
Yes, of course.
Great. Thank you so much and good luck with everything.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye-bye. Now I would like to pass the floor to our another speaker, to our another successful principal investigator of our project. It's starting grant, the invisible history of the United Nations and the Global South, Dr. A.O'Mєйлі, please. No, Alana is here.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Hi, good morning from Leiden. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your conversation. I think you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Great. So yes, so as Karina mentioned, I got a starting grant actually back in 2019. So I'm right at the end of my starting grant now. So perhaps we'll have a slightly different perspective from the other speaker. And I'm also a historian. I'm based here at Leiden, and but I'm Irish, so I've been here. I was here before I had the grant. And I have a project on the United Nations and the Global South. So what I'm going to do is just take you through the introduction to the project. And then I think what you really want to know is more the introduction to writing the grant and then tips and tricks. And I thought actually the last speaker also gave some great advice about that. So I have this project challenging the liberal world order from within about the invisible history of the United Nations and the Global South. And the argument in the project is that the United Nations is an organization that we understand only from the Western perspective, because we have really only Western histories of the UN and its purposes and its practices. And I always was very confused about this as a historian, because every time you go to the archives of the UN, it's not the Western actors who are most prominent, it's the actors from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And so the project kind of came from a long time of thinking about how to solve that problem. And I came to this question of how did these actors shape the UN and change it over time? And that this would give us a new global history of the UN that was a kind of a different genealogy than simply this story that the UN was established by the victorious powers at the end of the Second World War. So it has a kind of starting point, if you like, that's a little bit against the grain of conventional histories. And I didn't want to limit it only to thinking about the UN, because that's a smaller kind of pool of interest. And so I tied it to this idea of the liberal world order. And so that really became the kind of crux of the project. So it starts from this, and certainly I wrote the application from that perspective, that this was a problem that we wanted to solve, that the UN has been misunderstood in history, and that there are invisible histories of the organization that exist, but that we haven't incorporated. And I use that word invisible to suggest not that these histories don't exist, but that we have not comprehended how 2/3 of the world understand the most global organization, and through which they have received and they have participated in shaping the international system, especially in terms of conflict and security, social and economic development, and of course, human rights. And so this, in telling the problem in very kind of oblique terms, it was a good starting point to think about how then the rest of the application would propose to solve the problem. And so the aim then was to unravel these invisible histories, to transcend that Western perspective, and to recover the historical agency of Global South actors. And I'll go through how we were doing that in the project in a minute. And so then in thinking about that, I thought that that's also not enough. It's not enough to simply know what these state and non-state actors have done at the UN. I have to know how the UN itself was changed and what were the effects of that change. So the question then became broader in terms of how has the UN facilitated and limited their role in global order? To think about, what were the consequences of this agency working through the UN? So the three research objectives are about how the actors changed the UN by developing its functions, how, in which way by doing so, they challenged the liberal world order because they wanted to redefine political dynamics and produce new norms of behavior. And also, how does the UN work from the perspective of the Global South? So how do we get around this question of selection biases in issues and actors within the UN? So why do some problems become UN problems and why do other problems not? But also, what happens when the UN can't do anything about a particular issue? So does that just mean that it's left to the states? And what are the consequences for this in terms of the order, not just the North-South order, because that's another frame that we've used to tell the history of the 20th century, especially with regard to decolonization. We always talk about North-South, but the other part of that issue is the South-South order, right? So how, as decolonization evolves, are different hierarchies of inclusion and exclusion developed across the Global South? So how do Latin American states, for example, relate themselves to newly independent African states? And what's the link to big Asian states like Indonesia and India, who've also been decolonized, but who are in a very different power position than, say, Ghana or perhaps Nigeria in Africa? So this project then became something that is about the UN, but tells us a lot more about, global order more broadly, the relationship between states, and also how we can understand that from a different perspective, not just from this North-South angle. And the argument and the project has developed in these three dimensions. So it looks at how the UN was changed structurally with the creation of new committees. And that's just one example of the Committee of Special Political and Decolonization, which is set up in 1960. And then structurally, there was also not just the committees, but blocks and groups that formed. So the Afro-Asian bloc was formed in the 1950s. The G77, the Group of 77, came about in 1964. And so these were all formations also of different constellations of actors that were coming from the Global South. So this was a way to think about and to recognize their dynamism as actors, because at this time, the Western group, of which I'm being very kind of facetious, it doesn't really exist. So the Western powers don't even agree on how to respond to issues like apartheid. And so, in fact, what happens is that there's much more dynamism amongst states beyond the West, and that makes it much more interesting and dynamic to look at. I also argue that these states changed the rules and procedures of the UN to pursue normative change, right? So they actually went back to the Charter to look at new ways to do things in order to create normative change. And actually, a really good example of this is not in the project, but something that you will be familiar with, of course, is what Ukraine has done at the UN since the invasion of Russia a few years ago, where your UN team went back to the Charter and made arguments about the illegitimacy of Russian membership of the UN. And they went right back through the historical agreements around that time in the 1990s, that making the argument that Russia is not a successor to the seat of the Soviet Union on the Security Council. Now, that argument hasn't, produced an expulsion of Russia, but this is the kind of methodological innovation that I think we know very little about from any states during the UN's history. But this is exactly what especially Global South states were doing during the most of the 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, because they wanted to change the UN to suit their purposes. And so the project traces some of those efforts. And then institutionally, it's also important because these actors were institution builders. They wanted to make the UN bigger by making more institutions. So they created new bodies to serve these purposes, such as the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which deals with trade and development issues in Geneva. And so these are important markers because these have been lasting changes to the UN system. So anybody who says that Global South actors didn't do anything at the UN, simply don't have the accurate appreciation of actually what they did. So these are the three dimensions that we traced the project development on, and we then had to tie it to three different issues. And you can't do everything, even if you have 1.5 million euros and you have 5 years. It sounds like an infinity when you get it, but you still have to be concise. So we looked at decolonization, so self-determination issues, the quest for economic development, especially the question of economic and social rights, and an advancement of human rights. So economic and social rights as individual human rights. And these are the three themes that we use across those three dimensions at the UN to trace the agency of Global South actors from the three regions of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And so that was a graph that it's rather crude because I am not a graphic designer. And actually your previous speaker had a much more sophisticated set of diagrams. But this is what I drew up when I was writing the grant and put it into the grant application, obviously. And actually, a lot of my reviewers, not at the ERC, but before I sent it to the ERC, were like, look, this is too crude, you can't use this. But other people said, you need a graphic to exemplify things. So I kept this in and it worked out. And you can see this is not very, it's not very elaborate and it didn't take me very long to make it. But I think these kind of graphics are always very useful because even when the project is clear in your mind, it's difficult sometimes to explain it, especially when you have these different dimensions and different themes and different actors. So this is how I managed to group it together for my project. The second, or not the second, but the next thing, of course, is that, you're always encouraged in these applications, whether it's for a national research scheme or the ERC, to be groundbreaking. And the ERC likes these kind of terms, path-breaking, groundbreaking, fundamental research. And so I had to blow up the project to think about, what was it going to produce. And so we produce now a new image of the UN as both the facilitator and the inhibitor of Global South Agency. And so that's important because I didn't want to write a positivist project that would just tell another story about how great the UN is, which also, by the way, isn't a very popular story or popular history of the UN because there's so much criticism of the organization. So in terms of striking a balance, I wanted to look at how the UN, yes, facilitates these actors, but it also inhibits other actors within the Global South. And that's where the story becomes really interesting because you see that smaller states get pushed out of the frame and self-determination issues within decolonized states become very controversial. And those communities don't find recognition at the UN. And that means that we're operating in an international system full of implicit biases. And I wanted to understand historically the effects of those biases. Secondly, in telling the story of inclusion and exclusion, it shows us how the organization shapes relationships between the Global South actors. So by giving platform and agency to some actors over others, it creates new power hierarchies between the Global South. And that really tells us something new because we're, again, not telling the story of decolonization or not telling the story of the UN by only talking about the North-South question, because that's a very short story where a lot of cynics will just say, well, Global South actors didn't change anything because it's still the North and the West who were victorious at the end of the Cold War. And I think that's a very kind of teleological view that really crowds out the agency of most of the world. And so the argument then is that Global South actors perform a nuanced agency. So they're not value-free actors either. And there are positive and negative results in this. So they themselves are elites who practice exclusionary politics and oftentimes don't represent the best interests of their people. One of the challenges of the project was to think about the dark side of decolonization. So what do you do with regimes that come to power promoting a set of human rights principles that are actually quite liberal in their origins, and then the regime turns into an authoritarian regime that suppresses those rights? So how do you understand that as decolonization being liberatory or not? And that was one of the big questions that we discovered in the research of the project. What happens when decolonization is no longer liberating? how do we understand that as decolonization? And the second thing, of course, was to think about how the position of Western powers actually becomes rather marginal at the UN over time. And that tells us a very different story to how Western written histories of the UN have promoted and preserved the position of Western powers, especially. And I'm thinking a little bit less about the United States and much more about Western Europe. And so the impacts then are, we produced this new and critical history of the UN, but also we had a podcast as part of the project. We had a lot of op-eds and a lot of public engagement with forums who are interested in that moment. And the project happened to be timely in the sense that we've had a lot of inquiries from foreign ministries, because now there is a shift going on, geopolitical shift, and there's a tilt towards the South because Global South actors are more prominent in global order than ever. And so there's been a lot of interest in understanding, their history of participation in that order up to this present moment. So I'm going to stop there. That's the kind of project stuff. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about the process of writing the grant, because I think that's what you really want to know about. I was at the very last chance of doing the starting grant when I applied. I'll be very straight. I didn't have any success at either the Irish research grant schemes or the Dutch ones. I had applied with kind of very limited versions of this project to both, never got anywhere with that. And I was about to run out of eligibility for a starting grant, and I decided to do it. I had kind of done pilot research. So I'd been to archives in Ghana and in India, and I knew that there was a story to tell. So I'd seen some archives. So I decided to kind of take what I had found as the evidence, the kind of introductory evidence to suggesting there'd be more to do it. So I think if you have that chance to do pilot research to show, even in a limited way, that you have some familiarity with the sources or the research or the fieldwork that you want to do, I think it's very persuasive, and that was useful for the application. I think that the possibility of the ERC is kind of endless. So that's what's so great about it, is that you're not writing for a specific theme or under a specific frame, and you can really blow up the possibilities of your research by expanding it. And that was the most enjoyable part of writing this, because you could write this, like I could write this project with kind of no limits almost, right? So all the 3 regions of the Global South, all kinds of different state and non-state actors, almost 30-year time span. So, I mean, this was really, it's an advantage, I would say, of writing a grant, is that you get to expand the possibilities of your research and really think about what it could become. The other thing that I think is really important, and I think this is the hardest part, and the last speaker touched on this a little bit. You need to do 2 things with that. So if you blow up your project into some kind of big, massive idea, you have to be able to say in 2 or 3 sentences, why is this something that anybody would fund? Like that you could go to the man on the street and say, do you think this is important? And obviously cancer research is a really obvious one, but you have to have like a kind of a catch that will hook people in to say, yeah, I can understand, even as a non-historian, non-expert, why that would be important. And so for me, I was just able to say, we need a non-Western history of an organization in which the most dominant members are not from the West. So it was a very, when you say it like that, there's a kind of a logic to it. And the second thing, a bit more difficult in the project, writing the application, is that you have to have a kind of a logic that is kind of unbeatable, so that you have that catch, and then like it's paragraph after paragraph of proof why that project has to be done, and the logic with which you will write and conduct the project. And it's less so about I would say, you can write lots of smart things about what you'll do with your team and all that kind of stuff, but like the actual logic of why this is necessary and how you're going to do it. I think that's the hardest part of the application. But for me, as I said, I decided at the last minute. It was about 8 weeks to the deadline when I decided to do it. So not very last minute, but kind of last minute. But I had been thinking about this project or some version of it for a long time. And the other majorly helpful thing was to write an application and then have it peer reviewed by as many people as possible before it went to the ERC. And that was great because I got some devastating peer review from some colleagues and some friends, and that really helped to do it, because when you get good peer review, you know, you get so sick of writing it. I mean, you know, it completely, I would say for me, it completely took over my life for those 8 weeks, and it was just eating, breathing, sleeping this project idea. So when you get good peer review, you get a momentary knockback, but then you get new energy to kind of change it again. In that respect, then it's quite intense, but it's doable. And I think it's, in the end, you know, I feel very much that this project, when I was awarded the grant, it was a collaboration of a lot of the feedback and the input that I'd had from colleagues and from people who'd read it and responded to it, and the reviewers, of course. So in the end, you know, it's, you are the PI, it's your project, but it is a kind of, the more engaged you are with your peers and with your academic community, I think it only strengthens the project as much as possible. I suppose the final thing I would say is that, you know, it's not, it's kind of, in some ways, it's not meant to be an easy application to write. I mean, even the language of the instructions I found at times kind of difficult to kind of wade through. But in the end, it's an incredibly exciting indulgence to be able to dream up a dream research project and put it down onto paper. And even if you don't get success, and as I said, I failed many times before I got the starting grant in other schemes, you have then a project that you can work towards and, you know, work on in different formats afterwards. And in that regard, you know, I think there's a kind of a false idea that, you know, you spend so much time writing an application that you don't get anything out of it. I think you always get something, because it refines your own thinking on your topic, even if that's not successful. And then you always have another chance, you know, in either the starting grant or the next scheme, with good peer review. So that's always a useful thing, I think. So I'll leave it there because I've said a lot, but you can feel free absolutely to ask me any questions you like.
Thank you, Alana, very much. And are there some questions maybe? No? Okay, I have questions. Then how long did it take you to write the proposal? And was it just first time when you participated in the ERC calls or not?
It was the first time I participated in the ERC calls. Writing the B1, I mean, so the B1 is 5 pages, right? So it's not really that long. But it took probably 2 weeks to write the B1. The B2 took longer because it has to be more elaborate, of course. And again, you know, I think that the last speaker made the point about the grant writing as a genre. I think it's definitely its own genre, even the language you use and the way that you use an argument. But I think once you have a draft, you can keep just going. And I mean, I have to say that I just I've just finished writing the consolidators grant application for the last round. And by the time I submitted it, I think I was on draft 16 or something like that. So it is a cumulative process. It's not that you just, it's a perfect version in the first version that you write. And I don't think it's meant to be. I mean, I think it's actually very much, for me, the starting grant, the hardest part was writing the application. The interview was challenging, but it was not as difficult as the application itself. And I think you're also proving something to yourself when you can commit yourself to writing an application like this, because it's challenging. But in terms of time, yeah, it can be done. You can get a first draft done probably quicker than 2 weeks. But the key thing is to keep it going until you've got it into good shape.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is more to the essence of your project. How do you think, what is the future of the United Nations organization, as far as it's been strictly criticized because it's too reluctant in its reactions, and because the aggressor is sitting in the Security Council and so on, and some people, like politicians and lawyers, they like to say that international law is dead and so on. So how do you think, what is the future of the United Nations and the international law?
Yeah, I mean, what a time to ask this question. Also, in terms of what's happening in Ukraine, but also in Gaza, and many other places. I would say kind of two things in response. The first thing is that all these criticisms of the UN are correct, right? And so there's something fundamentally wrong with the organization in terms of its internal contradictions. So having Russia sitting on the Security Council and also then violating international law so flagrantly, it's an abuse of power, and it's very wrong. And the UN shouldn't be caught in contradictions like that. And now what we see also with what the US is doing at the UN, it's very negative. But the problem is that I think we can't really just throw the baby out with the bathwater and then abandon the UN, because then we have absolutely no organization in the world that checks the power of any of these countries. And I know it's not effective the way that we want it to be, but we have to, there is the responsibility of member states to imbue it with more power, and to imbue it with better overview and better regulation of behavior and better answerability to international law. Because if we step back from it and abandon it, that's it. We don't have any institution left to do that. There isn't another organization like the UN that exists. So first, I think we have to strengthen it. The second thing I think is that these criticisms are very valid, but if we look simply at the way that we resource the UN now, I mean, I think it's 0.5% of the US annual military budget. So what they spend on armaments in a year is what we give the UN to do peacekeeping, 0.5%. So they're facing peacekeepers, they're facing, these extremely well-funded, well-organized, well-trained armies, mostly now even of mercenaries. And they're supposed to do that with 0.5% of the funding that the other side has. And so I think, we have to get realistic about if we're going to imbue the UN with power, that also means putting more resources in. And without doing that, we also have no way to hold any of these states to accountability. We have no way to preserve the system of international law at all. And if we don't do it, then we're going to be in an even worse position than we're already in. And I think the starting point for preserving the UN is understanding it not as an arm of the West, because I think that traps the organization in this loop that then it's an arm of the West, and then it's a biased organization, then it doesn't work. But we have to understand these other histories. I mean, another project that I don't have the language to do, but it would be a great project, is how have Central and Eastern European states understood the purposes of the UN, because they have a totally different engagement with the organization, even than Western Europe. And so I think there is a lot that we don't know about how the UN has been shaped over time by these actors. And until we understand its real, full global histories, then we can't possibly reform it in a useful way to go forward.
Thank you very much, Alana, for your presentation, for being with us, for supporting us. And so if there are no any questions, so we will let you go as well. But before that, I want to thank to all our dear guests, to our speakers, and I want to wish a successful implementation of your projects, starting grants ERC. And maybe they won't be just the first ones, but then even we'll win another ones as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to say, if anybody has a question or wants to get in touch, then absolutely. And of course, Slava Ukraini, we had a Zelensky in Leiden on the video link 2 years ago, and we were absolutely in solidarity with him and with the cause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye. So now we proceed to our last presentation. I will make it in Ukrainian. It's a presentation of робоча програма Європейської дослідницької ради на 25 рік. Так, видно? Видно, так? Аня, можете подивитись, тому що тут не рухаються слайди.
Видно.
Да, щоб вони просто рухались нормально. Добре. Видно, так?
Так.
Рухаються слайди, так? Добре. Отже, я надішлю вам цю презентацію. Вона має дві частини. Перша частина, ну, її вже сьогодні торкались, це певна статистика щодо участі в проєктах ERC за попередні 4 роки. Можете її подивитись, там є кілька цікавих моментів і щодо того, які країни є найбільш успішними, і щодо того, куди йде найбільший бюджет, тобто які країни мають найбільш високий рівень фінансування і таке інше. Але зараз переходимо вже до наступної частини, це торкнемось робочої програми ERC на 25 рік. З самого початку тут же можна побачити, що є певні особливості, тобто є певні зміни, які були внесені в робочу програму 25-го року в порівнянні з робочими програмами попередніх років. Вони стосуються певні зміни і щодо форм заповнення заявки певних щодо головного дослідника. Також певні зміни торкнулись і процедури оцінювання, і також певні зміни стосуються щодо можливостей обмежень, особливо для головних дослідників, подавати заявки на наступний конкурс. Що ми бачимо в змісті цієї програми? Тут є і загальна інформація, як подавати заявку на отримання грантів ERC, є короткий огляд особливостей програми і робочої програми на 25 рік, і зазначені цілі та принципи фінансування проєктів ERC, і також, звичайно, зазначені, які основні гранти, конкурси на оці гранти були відкриті в 24-25 роках. І детально зазначені, що має бути у вашій заявці щодо фінансування, які є критерії прийнятності і відповідності, як подавати і описувати свою пропозицію, і також зазначені критерії і процедура оцінювання. Далі ще є кілька документів, які також нас стосуються, це додатки. Додатки – це, по-перше, оці первинні панелі оцінювання, які ви маєте обрати і зазначити, яка найбільше підходить саме під вашу проєктну заявку. Це додаток 1. Також є політика ERC щодо визнання і прирівнювання докторських ступенів. Є перелік країн, які асоційовані з програмою «Горизонт Європа», тобто основна вимога всіх грантів ERC полягає в тому, що ваші проекти повинні відбуватися або в країнах ЄС, або в країнах асоційованих до програми ЄС. Тож, щоб нічого не переплутати, от, будь ласка, оцей надано вам перелік. Також є додатки, які стосуються безпеки, плану гендерної рівності. Це ті додатки, які вам будуть потрібні, знову ж таки, при заповненні заявки, а саме там заповнюються ці таблиці, які стосуються питань безпеки, і гендерної рівності і питань етики. І також є ще зазначення в додатках, що ERC приймає участь в системі раннього виявлення та виключення. Мається на увазі, це система, яка містить інформацію щодо установ, які раніше отримували фінансування від Європейської комісії, але ці проекти або було там нецільове використання коштів, або якимось іншим чином були якісь там підтверджені порушення при аудитах. І відповідним чином, якщо ERC при отриманні вашої заявки знайде вашу організацію, ви можете про це знати точно або можете не знати, але якщо така організація, яка є вашою host organization, вона буде знайдена в цьому переліку, то одразу оцінювання цієї заявки припиняється. Щодо відкритих конкурсів. Цікавим є те, що відкриті конкурси на 25-й рік, хоча робоча програма на 25-й рік, але відкритий конкурс буде лише один. Решта, три конкурси, які також входять в цю програму робочу на 25-й рік, вони вже завершені. Причому двоє з них були закриті ще в 24-му році, а один завершився у січні 25-го року. Тобто, таким чином ми бачимо, що зараз на 25-й рік буде відкритий, оголошений у травні лише Advanced Grant, тобто це продвинутий грант, ну так би мовити, назвемо його. А решта конкурсів в цій робочій програмі закриті. Але буде ще, як зазвичай прийнято у ERC, на рік раніше публікується робоча програма, і відповідним чином робоча програма на 26-й рік буде опублікована десь, може, восени чи взимку 25-го року, і там можуть бути оголошені конкурси, які входитимуть в програму 26-го року, але вони будуть відкриті вже у 25-му році, тому слідкуйте за цими оновленнями. Отже, ми бачимо, що у нас для нас буде відкритий Advanced Grant. Що мається на увазі? Це підтримка таких просунутих, вже відомих головних дослідників на етапі їхньої кар'єри, коли вони вже стали визнаними науковими лідерами, мають істотний, такий вражаючий послужний список дослідницьких досягнень, і при цьому головні дослідники мають продемонструвати такий новаторський характер, амбітність, але при цьому і здійсненність своєї дослідницької ідеї, своєї дослідницької пропозиції. Отже, загальний обсяг такого гранту складає 2,5 мільйони євро на період 5 років, і додаткове фінансування надається на вирішення певних питань до 1 мільйона євро. Сьогодні вже пан Максим про це згадував щодо цього. І цікаво, що це якраз одна з тих змін, які внесені в робочу програму 25-го року, що тип фінансування такого проєкту – це lump sum, тобто разова сума виплат. При цьому варто зазначати, що якщо ми говоримо про бюджет максимальний 2,5 мільйони євро на 5 років, то він зменшується пропорційно до того, яка буде тривалість у вашого проєкту. Тобто, якщо тривалість зменшується на 1 рік, зменшується і бюджет проєкту приблизно на 500 000 євро. Щодо при цьому цікавим те, що це фінансування до 1 мільйона євро, воно не підлягає пропорційному скороченню, оскільки воно витрачається на, наприклад, придбання обладнання, чи доступ до якихось потужностей, чи переїзди дослідників до країни приймаючої установи. Тому це додаткове фінансування, воно не зменшується. Щодо обмежень, пов'язаних з правом інтелектуальної власності, то воно полягає в тому, що протягом 4 років після завершення вашого проєкту Європейська комісія може заперечувати проти передачі результатів ваших досліджень третім особам і передачі виключної ліцензії, на умовах виключної ліцензії, передачі прав на результати. Щодо фінансування, то нас цікавить оця lump-sum сума. Тобто це є виплата одноразового внеску, яка базуватиметься на виконаній і прозвітованій роботі, незалежно від фактичних витрат, які понесені на проєкт, і головне, щоб було виконано цей проєктну діяльність, виконано успішно. Тобто це є єдиний критерій звітування. От виконали успішно певні завдання, отримуєте фінансування, відшкодування. В цьому типі гранту буде один одноразовий внесок з розбивкою за бенефіціарами, якщо це застосовано, і він повністю охоплює роботу, яка має бути виконана в рамках запропонованого проєкту. Звичайно, що всі ці основні витрати, вони мають бути вже викладені, зазначені в бюджеті проєкту, так, якби ви розраховували бюджет вашого проєкту на основі фактичних витрат, але, тобто ви повинні мати можливість прозвітувати про свої витрати, але все ж таки, якщо це ламп-сам, то ви звітуєте головне, ви звітуєте успішністю виконаних завдань. Щодо критеріїв прийнятності і відповідності, ну, тут це формальні тут викладені критерії, що всі заявки мають бути повними, мають бути читабельними, доступними, і вони подаються головними дослідниками, однак від імені приймаючої установи. Щодо галузей, наукових галузей, за якими можна подавати проекти. Тут застосовується в розділі Excellent Science, Pillar 1 програми «Горизонт», цей bottom-up підхід, коли ви самі пропонуєте тему вашого наукового дослідження, відповідним чином самі обираєте відповідні наукові галузі. Єдине обмеження, що, ну і головне, щоб ви правильно змогли вибрати ту панель оцінювання, яка буде згодом оцінювати ваш проєкт. Дослідницькі пропозиції, які спрямовані на ядерну енергетику, вони не розглядаються будь-яким з напрямків програми «Горизонт Європа», крім програми «Євротом». Також можуть бути обмеження, якщо ви плануєте якісь дослідження в військовій галузі, або в галузях, пов'язаних з військовою діяльністю. В такому випадку краще заздалегідь проконсультуватись з експертами, з ERC в даному випадку. Щодо прийнятності критеріїв для головних дослідників, то, в принципі, знову ж таки, діяльність відкрита, діяльність в програмі ERC, вона відкрита для дослідників з будь-якої країни, з будь-якої національності. Єдине, щоб ці дослідники мали намір проводити свою діяльність в країнах ЄС або в асоційованих країнах до програми «Горизонт Європа». Знову ж таки, ніяких обмежень по віку, національності не може бути, але введені певні обмеження щодо того, скільки часу пройшло з моменту отримання ступенів PhD, і якщо такі обмеження є, то тоді вони прямо зазначені в умовах конкурсу. Тому, будь ласка, звертайте на це увагу. Щодо критеріїв прийнятності, відповідності приймаючої установи. Ця приймаюча установа, вона повинна мати можливості і потужності, щоб залучити, розмістити в себе головного дослідника на період виконання проєкту, як це зазначено в грантовій угоді. Відповідно, ця приймаюча установа, вона повинна мати стабільні і достатні ресурси для успішної реалізації таких проєктів і вносити свою частку в це. Також, якщо ви подивитесь на статистику участі по проєктах, то ви побачите, що, наприклад, там десятки тисяч проєктів виконуються, але приймаючих установ всього на сьогодні близько 900. Тобто, як ми можемо зрозуміти, ці приймаючі установи, вони можуть вести кілька таких великих проєктів, і відповідним чином ця приймаюча установа, вона повинна мати ресурси не лише на один проєкт, але й на кілька таких важливих проєктів. Обмеження щодо подання пропозицій. Дослідник може брати участь в якості головного дослідника лише в одному основному гранті з передових досліджень одночасно. Тобто, скільки б заявок ви не подали за вашої участі, оцінюватись буде перша, яка потрапить до рук оцінювачів. Ну і та, звичайно, що відповідає формальним вимогам. Також головний дослідник, заявка якого була відібрана для фінансування і який готує грантову угоду за конкурсами 23-24 років, він знову ж таки не може приймати участь в конкурсах 25-го року. І також, якщо головний дослідник, який є чинним членом експертної ради в конкурсі 25-го року або 23-го чи 24-го років, він знову ж таки не може сам подаватись як головний дослідник на цей самий тип конкурсів в 25-му році. Також тут, і ось тут важливо звернути увагу саме на не рік подання відкриття вашого конкурсу, а на до якої робочої програми ваш конкурс входить, в якому ви хочете приймати участь. Тобто, якщо ви були експертом в 23-24 роках, наприклад, да, то ви дивитесь робочу програму за 25 рік, і ви в ній не можете приймати участь. Тобто, всі конкурси, які були оголошені в 24 році, вони також сюди входять. Тобто, ви не могли в них приймати участь так само. Так. Щодо, ну ось тут зазначені такі винятки щодо, які надають додатковий час, по-перше, досліднику, наприклад, це якщо якісь були перерви в його дослідженнях і які є підґрунтя для цього. Це може бути материнство, батьківство, тривала хвороба, державна служба. Цікаво, що тут вони йдуть однією строкою: тривала хвороба або державна служба. Або це могла бути інвалідність, або стихійне лихо і таке інше. Це те, що перерви, які дозволяються в плині вашої наукової кар'єри. Також тут можемо побачити, які є періоди між тим, коли головний дослідник захистив свою свою дисертацію PhD, і тим, коли він подає заявку на участь в грантах. Тобто, якщо він захистив дисертацію, пройшло з цього 7 років, то в цей період від 2 до 7 років він може подаватись на starting grant. Якщо пройшло від 7 до 12 років з моменту його захисту PhD, він може подаватись на consolidator grant. Якщо він хоче подаватись на advance або synergy grant, то таких конкретних обмежень немає щодо часу, коли була отримана, захищена перша дисертація. Щодо мінімальних витрат часу, це є дуже важливий момент, який окремо відображається в заявці. В умовах конкурсу зазначено, що під кожен з типів проєктів ERC головний дослідник повинен бути готовий витрачати певну кількість свого часу у відсотках. І він ставить свій підпис, і він зазначає, що він згоден саме з таким розподілом часу. Отже, якщо ми говоримо про starting grant, то дослідник має бути готовий витратити 50% свого робочого часу на роботу над цим проєктом. І в цей час він має знаходитись в тій державі, країні ЄС або асоційованій країні, де розташована його приймаюча установа. Тобто не може бути такого, що ви знаходитесь в Україні, ваша приймаюча установа в Естонії, ви кажете, що ви працюєте над проєктом, і 50, і 100% часу, це буде не враховано, це буде вважатися невиконанням проєкту. Якщо у вас приймаюча установа в Естонії, в Тарту університеті, для прикладу, да, то ви, значить, маєте знаходитись цей час в Тарту, а ніде інше. Consolidator Grant, значить, це може бути витрачено до 40% часу, і Advanced Grant до 30% робочого часу може бути присвячено роботі над цим проєктом, але все ж таки 50% свого часу все одно має бути проведено в державі члені ЄС або асоційованій країні, де знаходиться приймаюча установа. Щодо опису пропозиції, варто тут звернути увагу, що це дуже тут детально пояснено саме в робочій програмі, і майже тут же не потрібне керівництво для заповнення проєктних заявок і додаткові документи, тому що от саме в робочій програмі все детально і чітко пояснено. Отже, з чого складається грантова пропозиція? Вона складається з опису пропозиції, розширеного синопсису, біографічної довідки послужного списку для кожного головного дослідника, сама наукова пропозиція, яка складається з 14 сторінок, опису, які ресурси необхідні і часові витрати будуть залучені, це 2 сторінки. Обов'язковою є заява приймаючої установи на те, що вона згодна надавати свої можливості під проведення цього проєкту. Є також таблиця, стосується яка стосується етичних питань, питань безпеки, і також є послужний список кандидата наук та супровідна документація, яка буде підтверджувати оці відомості, які зазначені ним в його послужному списку. Щодо критеріїв оцінювання, ну, підкреслюється, що критерії оцінювання, їх лише два. Оцінюється сам дослідницький грант і оцінюється головний дослідник. Вони проходять оцінювання саме для Advanced Grant, вони проводяться в два етапи. Після, ну, сьогодні Максим вже про це, до речі, теж розповідав, щодо грантів Synergy Grant, то там проводиться 3-ступеневе оцінювання. За результатами оцінювання далі або заявка проходить на другий етап, або вона не проходить. Але що оцінюється? В дослідницькому проєкті оцінюється його новаторський характер, амбітність, але і при цьому реалістичність. Також можливо зазначити, які є ризики щодо цього проєкту, щодо його впровадження. І це вважається плюсом, що дослідник усвідомлює, що можливі такі ризики, але при цьому необхідно зазначити, якою мірою запропоновані заходи, які можуть запобігти цим ризикам, виникнення цих ризиків, або зможуть допомогти вирішити ці проблеми. Це також треба зазначити в вашій заявці, це буде лише плюсом. В принципі, експерти завжди підкреслюють, що навіть якщо ваш проєкт має багато ризиків, це для них є прийнятним для ERC, оскільки це передові дослідження, це проривні дослідження, і вони завжди можуть супроводжуватись наявністю певних ризиків, тому це не буде проблемою при оцінюванні. Головне, щоб ви знали, як головний дослідник, як впоратись з виникненням цих проблем. Щодо головного дослідника, то оцінюється його інтелектуальний потенціал, його креативність і якою мірою він продемонстрував в своїй заявці здатність проводити новаторські дослідження, в якій мірі він надає докази свого творчого оригінального мислення, в якій мірі він має відповідний науковий досвід, і також будуть і визначатись, якщо він це зазначить, головний дослідник, а це вважають за необхідне, щоб було зазначено, чому, на яких підставах його високо оцінюють колеги, і які є в нього певні відзнаки, що дійсно його науковий доробок оцінений достатньо високо. Ну, в принципі, це все, що так, якщо швидко казати про робочу програму. Тож, також ще хочу зазначити, що, будь ласка, дивіться наше оновлення на Facebook-сторінці, на сторінці нашого сайту. І я думаю, що короткий звіт і відеозапис цього семінару буде викладений, буде, може, на сайті НАН України викладений, і сам відео семінару буде викладено на YouTube-каналі НАН України. Я розішлю всім бажаючим на нього посилання. Так що дякую за увагу. Є якісь питання? Бачу, що немає, так? Питань немає. Добре, тоді дякую всім за участь. А у нас після завершення нашого семінару, вебінару, будуть за бажанням надаватись індивідуальні консультації, тому, будь ласка, якщо або ви залишаєте наше Zoom-посилання, або залишаєтесь, і ми тоді продовжимо як в форматі індивідуальних консультацій. Будь ласка. Дякую за увагу.
Дякуємо.
Дякую.
Дякую вам.
Дякую.
Дякую.
Так, що
Дякуємо.